Good evening and welcome to Sleepless Historian. If you've come here to slow down to loosen the day from your shoulders and let the night grow quiet, you're in the right place. Breathe at your own pace. Let the room you're in become still. We'll take our time. And if this gentle way of wandering through the past helps you rest, you're always welcome to join us again, to subscribe for more quiet journeys into medieval life. No rush, we'll be here when you need us. Tonight we go below the bright halls and lacquered boasts below banners and carved beams to a part of the castle most visitors never see unless they were born to it. The feast upstairs has ended. Somewhere far above us, a final cup is set down. A final laugh dissolves into a corridor. A door closes with a wooden sigh. What remains here is the ordinary work of ending a celebration bones, brushed from trenchers, wine pooled in the grooves of long tables, wax cooling on the flagstones, a dropped ribbon, a bent spoon. The big fire has narrowed itself into a red eye. The music is a memory. The smoke hangs thinking about where to go. We speak as we, because that is how this world is lived. We are the hands that wipe the oak smooth again, the feet that learn every creak of every stair, the backs that bow and straighten 100 times. We are the quiet that returns a hall to order. When the lords boast of winter hunts or summer battles, our names are not part of the telling, but our warmth is hidden inside their comfort. And when the great men sleep, our night truly begins. First, we finish what must be finished, rinsing a goblet no one will notice in the morning, coaxing a little spit of flame from sullen coals, laying a log so carefully it makes more light than smoke, folding a cloth that will soon be unfolded again. The castle is a creature of breath, and stone it inhales through the arrow slits and exhales through the vents. It groans when the wind presses its ribs. It settles when the world goes quiet. We learn to move with it, to keep to the edges, to step around the cold puddles that gather where the walls weep. The floor is clean enough, which is to say that it has been asked to be kind. Now comes the part: no inventory lists and no romance songs bother with finding where we will sleep. Not rooms, places. A piece of floor near the kitchen arch, where warmth lingers like a memory. A darker corner in the buttery, where the air smells of yeast and wood. A spot on the stairs middle, landing because the draught hesitates there and forgets to bite. The mill boy will curl between sacks of flour. The stable girl will tuck herself where the straw is newest. The scullion will lie lengthwise to the hearth, measuring himself against the last of the heat. We have each learned a method for being small. We do not waste wood. Wood is the Lord's wealth made visible. A log burnt at midnight is a memory the steward keeps on his slate. So we deal in smaller coins, a fist-sized ember wrapped in cracked tile, a riverstone heated and swaddled in an old sleeve, a patch of rushes turned with the warmer side up. We make quilts out of nearness, cloak, touching cloak, shoulder, finding shoulder. A cat granting us the privilege of its trust by choosing the place between two ribs where the purring can be felt from inside. Warmth is borrowed, never owned, and the debt is paid back by another breath in the morning. The senses in this lower world are honest. The stone has a taste iron and rain. The air has a sound soft and granular, like sand being poured from a high hand. The smells are not lavender or rosewater. They are smoke and rendered fat-spilled ale, wet wool old ash, the sweetness of baked grain that lingers even after the loaves are gone. We do not despise these smells. They are the alphabet our work is written in, and if the letters stain our hands, they also write us into the day that follows. This is not luxury. This is life. Above us tapestries tame the wind. Below we make our own ways of persuasion, a folded apron to cushion a hip, a knotted corner of a blanket to keep it from wandering. 2 fingers slipped between the neck and the wall to measure the draught before we trust it. We know where the rats dare and where they do not. We know which hinge answers to a breath of oil and which prefers to complain. We know how to sleep with one ear awake and how to wake with one thought, already moving fire, water, bread. Before we lie down, we give the room back to quiet. A poker set just so. A pot nudged off the hotter brick. A door eased against its latch so it won't clap itself open when the wind changes. We are not thanked for this. The thanks is inside the safety it brings for all of us. And then we took ourselves into the shapes the castle allows, not the ones we would choose. We do not ask for softness. We ask for enough. In the story that follows, we will let the night unfold at the pace it deserves. We will find the places servants slept and what they slept on. We will share the small tricks for stealing warmth from winter without stealing wood from the steward's count. We will listen to the castle's low music, the drip, the scuttle, the thread of wind. We will sit with the ones who do not sleep at all, and we will dream the dreams that visit those who serve. If this quiet companionship helps you drift, you are welcome to close your eyes whenever you wish. The tale will keep watch. For now, settle where you are. Imagine the ember dimming to a patient heart. Imagine a rough cloak drawn to the chin, a palm warmed by a stone, the comfort of many lives breathing toward one another in the dark. We will begin, and we will go gently. Where servants slept. Night inside a castle is not one darkness, but many. The kind that seeps through arrow slits and curls around the stairwell is not the same as the dark beneath the kitchens, where the air stays thick with the day's smoke. Each corridor breeds its own shade of shadow, its own sound. For us, the servants, the trick is to find the place where the dark feels least cruel. When the last fire in the hall sighs down to cinders, the higher floors grow silent first. Nobles and knights retire behind tapestries that rustle like slow waves. Doors close, latches find their sockets, bolts slide home. Footsteps fade until only ours remain soft and bare, brushing across the flagstones. The castle above us falls asleep in comfort. Below, in the working heart of the building sleep, is something we must invent. We do not have rooms, we have corners. A corner remembers you if you use it often enough. It keeps a little of your scent, your warmth, a fold in the rushes that fits your hip. The corner by the bakery's oven is coveted warm through most of the night, fragrant with dough and wood smoke. But if the baker rises early, and he always does, his shouting ends that comfort long before dawn. So we trade corners quietly, the way richer folk trade land. You learn to make a home out of habit, not possession. Some sleep under the stair that leads to the solar. The curve of the stone keeps the worst of the wind away, and the steps overhead make a sort of roof that hums softly when someone passes. Others lie in the passage that runs between the buttery and the cellar, where the smell of ale leaks from the casks. The floor there sweats in winter, slick and cold, but at least it's level. The stable boys, lucky creatures, bed down near their horses. They share heat with the animals and wake to the sound of breathing that isn't entirely human. Even the kitchen cat has its chosen ledge above the larder door, a throne compared to most of ours. We learned long ago not to sleep too near the outer walls. The stones there grow colder than any frost, and the mortar sweats even when the fire still glows in the great hall. If you put your hand to the wall at midnight, it feels alive and indifferent, like the hide of a great beast that does not care whether you freeze or not. Better to lie where the air smells of bread or ash, where life has recently happened. Warmth clings to work the way light clings to glass. The young ones, new to service, often try to sleep standing guard near the embers of the kitchen fire. They start bold, telling stories, rubbing their palms, pretending the night doesn't bother them. Before long they're crouched like crickets, hands under arms, eyes closing in jerks. We older ones smile and let them be. Everyone learns the same lesson. Heat is a promise that always fades. What endures is the will to keep still long enough for your own body to remember what warmth felt like. When the snow comes, and it always does, the castle's breath changes. Drafts find new paths, the floor cracks louder, the smell of wet wool fills the air. We plug the gaps with straw and old rags, muttering small spells of patience. Sometimes, if fortune smiles, we find the faintest current of warm air rising through a crack in the flagstones from the bakehouse below. Then we spread our cloaks there and lie like pilgrims over a hidden relic, grateful without knowing why. A single patch of heat can feel like mercy. We make no fire for ourselves. Flames belong to the masters. Smoke betrays our presence. So the darkness we sleep in is purer, more absolute. You would think it lonely, but it isn't. The dark holds company. The drip of a far bucket, the scrape of a rat searching for crumbs, the groan of timbers as if the castle dreams. These sounds fold around us like another kind of blanket. In their rhythm we hear reassurance that the world continues, that we are still inside it. There is hierarchy even in exhaustion. The steward has a pallet near the counting room where the walls are thick and dry. The cook claims the warmest corner of the kitchen, and none of us argue. Her favour feeds us. The washerwomen sleep close to the door because their work begins before the dawn's frost can be melted from the tubs. The scullion's children really curl up together on old aprons, their faces streaked with soot, their fingers still smelling of onions and soap. We look at them and see our own beginnings. Service doesn't age you, it simply collects you in layers of tiredness until you are more silence than person. Sometimes, if the night is kind, we talk before sleep. Whispered stories move through the dark, like sparks that never quite catch. A tale of a summer field, of a market day, of a love that almost was. Laughter comes softly muffled by rags, but it comes all the same. We laugh not because anything is funny, but because laughter sounds a little like heat. It warms the air around the mouth and tells the others, I am still here. Then the talk fades. One by one we let the silence grow back, and our bodies settle into their shapes against the floor. It's strange how stone, if you lie on it long enough, begins to forget its hardness. Your bones learn the hollows. Your breath matches the slow breathing of the walls. We fall asleep, not above the earth, but inside it, as though the castle were a shell, and we the small creatures keeping it alive. Every servant has a ritual for sleep. One wraps her feet in cloth to quiet the ache. Another crosses himself 3 times against the draught. I, for my part, always touch the floor with the back of my hand before lying down. If it's colder than my skin, I whisper, you win tonight. If it's warmer, I smile. Either way, the floor never answers, but somehow the gesture makes the night seem fairer. Sometimes we are woken by noises from above, dreams we don't share. The nobles stir in their featherbeds, calling out names we never hear in daylight. We listen, half asleep, to the echo of their troubles, and wonder what it would be like to dream of such things. Hunts, wars, loves. Our own dreams are smaller, stitched from the fabric of need. We dream of bread that never runs out of water, that stays warm of mornings without frost. And yet in those dreams, we feel richer than anyone on the upper floors. The air grows colder toward dawn. That's when sleep is deepest, most dangerous. The body fooled by fatigue begins to drift too far. The cold creeps in without warning. More than one servant has died in such an hour, found stiff eyes, half open, a thin smile on the lips, as if the dream had turned merciful. We know this, and still we risk it, because every hour stolen from labour feels like a prayer whispered under your breath. It is our way of speaking to the night. Let us rest a little longer, and we will rise when you ask. Once years ago, I tried sleeping on a bench meant for guests. I thought the wood would be kinder than stone. It was not. It held the ghost of polish, the smell of beeswax and pride, and it made me restless. I crept back to my corner by the scullery where the air tasted of smoke and salt, and there on my own hard patch of floor I slept. Comfort, I learned, is not in the thing, but in its familiarity. The body loves what it survives. In the depth of winter, when the snow climbs halfway up the walls outside the castle, feels like a ship frozen in a white sea. We, its crew, move below deck unseen, but necessary. If we keep breathing, the ship endures. That thought is worth more than a blanket. Sometimes I imagine the castle itself watching over us, not the lord, not the lady, but the stone and timber, the ancient heart that remembers every footstep that ever crossed it. It knows who keeps its fires fed and its floors scrubbed. It knows who whispers to it when no one else is awake. And though it never speaks, I like to think it is grateful in its own vast, cold way. If you listen, you can almost hear the rhythm of this place. Heat rising, cooling rising again. Sleep found, lost found again. We are part of that rhythm. Without us, the castle would breathe unevenly. So we lie down where we can, trusting the dark, trusting each other, trusting that the world will still be turning when the first bell rings. We sleep in kitchens, in corridors, in lofts above the stables. We sleep on stone, on straw, on memories. We sleep under the same roof as kings, and yet are invisible to them. But when the cold presses hardest, it presses on all of us. And in that shared pressure, there is a kind of equality no sermon could teach. The frost does not know titles, it only knows skin. And tonight, as every night, we will give it what we must, and keep what warmth we can. So here we are, the unseen ones, curling ourselves into the quiet corners of the medieval night. The hall above may glitter in memory, but the life below it still hums steady and low. Close your eyes if you wish. The story will keep whispering. The stones are patient. The air is learning to be kind. And somewhere in this great body of walls and shadows, we too will find our breath slowing, our bodies easing our hearts, drifting toward the fragile mercy called sleep. What they slept on. A castle floor is not just cold, it remembers the cold. Even when the fire burns bright at dusk, even when spilled wine and laughter still echo from the great hall above the stones underneath hold yesterday's frost. They are older than comfort, older than any servant who has ever dared to lie upon them. If you press your cheek against one, you can almost hear the past humming faintly inside footsteps of those who served before you, and those before them, each leaving behind a trace of warmth that faded too quickly to save the next soul. That is what we sleep on. Not beds, not the fine mattresses stuffed with feathers that sigh under the weight of noble bodies. We sleep on memory, on what's left, on what's allowed. When newcomers first arrive, bright-eyed, soft-handed, still smelling of the fields, they look for a bed as if it were a right. Their eyes dart around the kitchen, the storeroom, the servants' hall, searching for straw mattresses, like those they once shared with brothers and sisters back home. We watch them quietly because everyone asks the same question with their eyes before learning not to. Eventually, someone older points to a heap of bundled rushes, or to a pile of grain sacks stacked against the wall, and says simply, "There. That is where we sleep. If we are lucky, we have straw. Fresh straw golden, and light crackling, under touch like dry thunder. It smells faintly sweet when it's new, a scent that makes you think of summer of meadows that will never belong to you again. But fresh straw never stays fresh for long. Within a week it is flattened, darkened by sweat and ash, carrying the sharp odour of labour. In time, it clumps into knots that poke your ribs, and tiny mites begin their quiet feasts in the seams. By then the straw is no longer something you lie on, it is something you negotiate with. We shift, we turn. We find the softer patches by instinct, as if our bones can sense which parts of the night will be kind. Some of us sleep on bundles of old cloth discarded garments from masters who've long outgrown them or moved on to finer fashion. What was once velvet becomes our pillow. What was once silk becomes a lining against the chill of the floor. There is a strange intimacy in that pressing your body against fabric that once brushed the skin of someone you serve. The scent lingers faintly, even after years oil, wine, perfume, pride. We do not resent it. In the dark, such things lose their arrogance. Every thread noble or common ends in the same quiet weave of sleep. Those without straw or cloth make do with whatever can be folded, padded, or imagined. Flour sacks empty and soft become blankets. Burlap becomes a sheet. A thick apron folded twice is enough to cradle a head. There is no shame in improvisation. Survival itself is a kind of craft. The castle teaches you to be an inventor, to turn waste into warmth. A discarded curtain becomes a cape. A broken chair leg wrapped in rags becomes a bedpost for your dreams. We do not tuck ourselves in so much as we anchor ourselves to the floor, to the hour, to the knowledge that this moment of stillness is ours and no one else's. Sleep is a stolen thing, and like all stolen things, it must be handled gently. Too much movement, and it's gone. Sometimes, when we are granted mercy by circumstance, say after a festival, when the hall burns hot with leftover fires, we find abandoned rush mats the nobles use to protect their boots from the wet floor. When the guests leave, those mats remain, and for a night or two, they become our treasure. You'd be surprised how soft woven reeds can feel when you've spent a year on bare stone. The body recognizes small luxuries the way the tongue recognizes salt instantly, completely. Even a thin layer between skin and stone feels like a promise kept. Yet even comfort has its dangers. Straw catches fire easily. A careless coal, a knocked candle, and everything you've built for warmth becomes an embered trap. We've all seen it happen. A sudden crackle, a cry, the smell of singed cloth and fear. After such nights we sleep further from the hearth, shivering but grateful to still have bodies worth shivering in. There are, of course, the lucky few, the senior servants, the nursemaids, the clerk, the steward, who have pallets or narrow wooden frames for their sleep. Thin planks, a straw mattress, a woolen cover, nothing grand, yet compared to us, they live in abundance. We do not envy them too deeply. The castle gives each person the bed their station deserves, and we have long stopped arguing with that logic. Jealousy cools faster than stone. The youngest among us, the boys who scrub pots, the girls who fetch water, fall asleep wherever they collapse. On folded arms at the table, curled by the hearth, or even standing back against the wall, lulled by the rhythm of exhaustion. Their dreams come quickly, like a mercy from God. We older ones envy that too, not the sleep, but the innocence that allows it. The longer you serve, the more you think before you close your eyes. You think of the list for tomorrow of who might wake first, of whether the steward's temper will thaw with the morning Sunday thought we have learned is heavier than any blanket. Still, the body adapts. What was once unbearable becomes simply part of the night. The ache in your shoulder finds a groove in the floor. The bruise on your hip learns to negotiate with the stone. After enough seasons, you could lie on a frozen path and still fall asleep before the first crow calls. It's not that you grow stronger, only more familiar with discomfort. Familiarity is its own kind of peace. When the frost deepens, we get creative. Some heat a brick in the oven before the fires die and wrap it in cloth. Others steal a few minutes near the great chimney after the cook has gone soaking in its ghost warmth until it fades. We share secrets like this the way other people share recipes. One woman ties straw inside her skirts to trap air. Another places her boots under her knees to keep the leather from stiffening. None of these things are taught. They are learned by surviving. There's a certain pride in that, a small, invisible dignity. We know the castle in ways no noble ever will. We know which stones weep in the night and which beams crack first in frost. We know where the mice run, where the warmth lingers, where the shadows are gentle. We have mapped this place not with parchment, but with skin and fatigue. Every bruise is a landmark. When morning comes, no one will see where we slept. The broom will sweep away the straw. The cloths will be folded, the floor scrubbed. The traces of our rest vanish as though they never were. It's almost as if the castle itself erases the evidence, ashamed that its grandeur rests upon our small acts of survival. But we know. We carry the memory in our bones, in the way our backs bend, and our eyes search automatically for the next place to lie down. Some nights, lying half awake, I listen to the floor beneath me, to the slow cooling of stone, the soft settling of ash. I imagine that somewhere deep in the walls, all the warmth ever shared in this castle still lives on faint but stubborn. The laughter of cooks, the sighs of maids, the whispered prayers of boys who miss their mothers, all stored inside the rock like trapped sunlight. Perhaps in some way that warmth rises through the walls and reaches even the lords asleep above us. Perhaps our hardship becomes their comfort, and in that strange exchange, balance is kept. When I was younger, I used to dream of beds. I'd heard stories of feather mattresses that hugged the body of linen sheets, so smooth they glowed in candlelight. But now, when I try to imagine lying in one, I can't. The thought feels too soft, too uncertain. A feather bed would make me restless like floating on a pond with no shore. The ground, for all its cruelty, offers honesty. It does not pretend to care, and that honesty lets you rest. The stone does not shift. It holds you exactly as you are, small, tired human. There's a strange beauty in that humility. The floor teaches you to meet the world at its level, to accept gravity as a kind of kindness. The closer you lie to the earth, the more you remember that warmth is a miracle, not a right. And so each night repeats the ritual. We find our corners, spread our rags, make a pillow of folded hands. The castle breathes around us. Somewhere far above, a noble woman turns in her sleep, rustling silk against fur. Down here, our chorus is quieter, the scratch of straw, the sigh of bodies, yielding to fatigue, the murmur of small prayers. The two worlds never meet, but both are cradled by the same walls. If you were to walk through the castle at midnight, you would not see us. You would see only the traces. A faint footprint near the hearth. A sack folded, as though someone once leaned against it, a shadow that seems to breathe. But listen closely, and you might hear what the stones hear, the steady rhythm of those who sleep, not for luxury, but for survival. A rhythm humble, yet eternal, like the beating of the earth itself. We do not ask for more. A dry patch of ground, a wall that breaks the wind, a piece of straw that still remembers summer. These are our treasures. We sleep where we can, not where we wish. But in that small obedience to necessity, there is a quiet grace. Because to lie down after labour, even on the hardest floor, and still find rest that is a victory, no banner, will ever mark. So when you imagine a medieval castle with its towers and torches and grand feasts, to remember us beneath it, the ones who sleep on straw and stone, who dream between chores, who wake before dawn to make warmth for others. The castle's beauty rests on our backs, its silence on our breaths. We are the thin layer between the cold of the earth and the comfort of those above the unseen bed upon which the whole house sleeps. And though no one will thank us when the bells ring and the fires rise again, we know this truth each night survived is a story told to the morning. Each hour of rest, however rough, is a prayer answered, and each patch of floor that holds us becomes for a few fleeting hours a home. The battle for warmth. Cold is a quiet predator. It does not strike like hunger or pain. It creeps. It moves through stone and cloth, through the softest parts of you, patient as breath. You never see it arrive. Only notice when your hands stop listening to your will, when your words lose shape before they reach your lips. In winter, the castle is its kingdom, and we, the servants, are its reluctant subjects. Every evening, when the fires upstairs roar, we begin our private war against the chill. It is a war fought not with weapons, but with ingenuity, with rags and straw, with breath and faith. The cold does not care who you serve. It enters through cracks, through keyholes, through the very idea of air. We have learned to outwit it, if not defeat it. The first rule, never waste heat. When the kitchen fire burns for the Lord's Supper, we stay close, pretending to tidy, to scrape pots, to polish cutlery. Each movement is a small theft of warmth. We let our arms hover over the flames just long enough to feel the sting before retreating. Too close and the cook will scold. Too long and the steward will notice. So we steal in seconds, a moment's heat for a night's endurance. When the embers begin to fade, we scatter like ghosts, searching for what remains. One person carries a small metal cup with a handful of coals. Another holds a brick just warmed enough to cradle under their apron. We do not speak much. Words waste breath, and breath is heat. What little fire we carry must last till morning. In the deeper parts of the castle, the cellars, the laundries, the stable's warmth is a currency rarer than gold. We learn to barter for it. A stable boy might trade a cup of milk for a few glowing coals. The cook might grant permission to linger near the oven in exchange for silence about a spilled pot. Even among us, warmth has rules, boundaries, debts. But when the night grows truly bitter, these rules dissolve. The cold is a great equalizer. It turns the proudest steward and the youngest scullion into the same creature, a body, trembling breath, clouding eyes, searching for the faintest glow of survival. You would laugh to see our contraptions, if laughter could survive the frost. We stuff straw into our sleeves, wrap rags around our feet, until we look like children pretending to be snowmen. We bind our wrists with bits of rope to keep the sleeves from slipping. We stuff dried rushes inside our tunics to trap the air. Some smear a thin layer of animal fat on their hands to keep the skin from cracking, a trick learned from the stablemaster who swears the horses taught him. Others sew bits of wool into their aprons, hidden from the steward's eye, a secret softness no one else will ever know. Each invention is humble, yet each feels like an act of defiance, a refusal to be conquered by cold. The bravest among us, or perhaps the most desperate, sleep near the hearth after the fire has been banked. They stretch their hands toward the faint glow measuring distance by pain close enough to feel the warmth, not so close that the rags catch flame. Sometimes in half-sleep, a servant will dream of summer and roll nearer to the fire, chasing the imagined Sunday. Those are the dangerous dreams, the kind that end in smoke and shouting. After such nights, the rule is repeated, Like prayer, the fire feeds, but it does not love you. Others try to warm themselves through work. They sweep longer, scrub harder, pretending to clean, when all they want is to move. Motion is heat. If you keep moving, your blood forgets the cold for a while. But motion has its cost. The moment you stop, the cold rushes back, with vengeance reclaiming what you stole. Sometimes mercy takes the shape of another person. When the air bites too sharply, we huddle together. There is no shame in that. The body knows kindness before pride. Shoulder to shoulder, we create a small world of breath and heartbeat. You can hear the rhythm of life echo between ribs, slow, steady, human. A shared cloak feels heavier, richer when it covers two. We have learned to lean into one another, not from affection, but from necessity. And perhaps that is the truest kind of bond. One breath shared meant one less shiver. I once asked the laundress, a woman who had seen 30 winters in service, how she endured it. She smiled with lips too pale to be called warm, and said, "The trick is not to fight it. You welcome the cold in like an unwelcome guest. Feed it nothing, give it no attention, and in time it grows bored." I tried that once. It almost worked until my fingers lost feeling and the broom slipped from my hand. Still, there is wisdom in her calm. The more you curse the cold, the stronger it feels. There are nights so sharp they make the air ring like metal. The wind pushes against the shutters and the castle moans in its sleep. We wrap our heads with cloth to muffle the noise, but the sound seeps through the endless sighing of a building older than our names. On those nights, we talk to ourselves softly. A hum, a half-remembered tune, anything to remind the body it is still alive. Words become warmth too, if you speak them gently enough. The animals fare better than we do. In the stables, the horses exhale foggy halos. The cows huddle, close their bodies, radiating comfort. Sometimes, when the head groom turns a blind eye, a boy slips between the stalls and lies against a mare's flank, the steady heart beneath her ribs, a lullaby. The smell is rough, sweat, hay and dung, but it is real warmth, alive and generous. There are worse beds than that. The kitchen dogs curl under tables, tails over noses. The cat, that small monarch, always finds the best spot on the stone, still warm from the oven, or atop a folded sack where flour dust glows faintly in the candlelight. We envy the cat, of course, but we also take comfort in its presence. If it curls beside you, you know you found the warmest patch in the room. That too is a kind of blessing. We have songs about warmth. They are not sung aloud. The steward forbids idle noise after curfew, but we hum them, old tunes from the countryside, where fires were free and nights less cruel. The words have worn away, leaving only the melody, simple and slow like the sound of breath between friends. Sometimes we hum in unison without meaning to, and the room feels softer, as if the cold itself is listening. Every winter takes its toll. Fingers split and bleed, lips crack, nails blacken from frostbite. But still we return to our work each morning, as though the body were a candle that can be relit, no matter how many times it's snuffed out. We joke that we are made of smoke, shapeless, tireless, everywhere at once. It's a comforting lie. The truth is that we endure because we must. The castle depends on our warmth more than it knows. There are moments, those small luminous ones, when warmth comes as grace. A pot left near the fire, too long radiating heat. A dropped piece of fur from a noble's cloak forgotten in the hall. A cup of broth slipped to you by the cook when no one is looking. These are miracles in miniature, and we remember each one. You learn to measure kindness in degrees of temperature. Once a storm sealed us inside for 3 days. Snow piled high against the doors, choking the light. The fires above burned through the Lord's woodpile faster than planned, and the steward rationed every ember. "No more for the servants," he said, his voice sharp as the wind. We nodded. What else could we do? That night we gathered in the scullery, a dozen of us, the air so cold it seemed solid. Someone began to laugh quietly at the absurdity of it all. Then someone else joined. Before long we were laughing without sound, shaking with mirth and cold alike. It wasn't joy exactly, it was rebellion. The cold could take our breath, but not our defiance. The next morning, when the doors were unsealed, the castle shimmered in white silence. We went back to work, as if nothing had happened. But I remember that night more vividly than any feast. In that frozen stillness, surrounded by people who shared my misery and my stubbornness, I felt something close to peace. Warmth not of body, but of belonging. That perhaps is what keeps us alive through the longest winters. Not heat itself, but the knowledge that none of us freeze alone. Each breath we share, each bit of straw we split, each ember passed from one hand to another becomes a vow. We are still here. The lords may boast of surviving battles, but this is our war. Fought every night, every season, every lifetime of service. And though the cold always returns, so do we. When dawn finally comes, it brings no comfort. The air is sharp, the sky pale, the stone unforgiving. Yet the moment the first bell rings we rise, we shake the frost from our sleeves, stamp our feet, and begin again. The war is never won, but the victory is in the rising. Because to rise after a night like that, to light the fire for another to warm the world that never warms you, is its own form of grace. And so as another night falls, and the frost gathers quietly on the windowsills, we prepare again, folding rags, stealing heat, whispering to the embers as if they were old friends. We know the enemy well. We know its patience. But we also know our own. For every servant who shivers in the dark, there is another who learns how to endure. And in that endurance, that fragile, glowing defiance, the castle itself stays alive. The sounds of the night below. At night the castle breathes, not with lungs but with doors that sigh, fires that murmur, rafters that creak as though remembering the wind. We live inside its breathing. The sounds of the night are not our enemies. They are our company, our proof that the world still moves beyond our exhaustion. Above us, silence is a privilege, the soft hush of fur against linen, the low whisper of nobility, settling into comfort. Below there is no such thing as silence. Here sound is the fabric of our world. Every noise has meaning. Every echo is a story half told. The first sound we learn to love is the fire dying. It has its own voice, a rhythm that tells us what kind of night it will be. When the wood collapses with a low hiss, it means a slow burn, steady warmth. When it cracks, sharply scattering sparks, we know the air is too dry, and the room will grow cold before dawn. We listen to the embers like other people, read scripture, searching for small promises inside the fading light. Then comes the wind. The wind in a castle is not a single thing. It finds hundreds of paths, narrow gaps between stones, loose shutters, the hollow behind the chimney. Each one sings differently. A whistle through the stairwell, a moan beneath the door, a whisper where the tapestry flutters like a heartbeat. At first the sound can frighten you. It feels like ghosts speaking in the language of drafts. But after a while, you learn its tone. You can tell by ear whether it carries snow or rain, whether it has crossed the moat or rolled down from the hills. Some nights the wind feels like company. You lie there half asleep and imagine it brushing your face, not as a thief, but as an old friend, checking if you still breathe. And then there are the footsteps, Not ours. Ours are soft-practiced invisible. These come from the floors above boots, crossing the hall long after the feast has ended. They move slowly, uncertainly. Sometimes it is the Lord himself sleepless, pacing between his chamber and the window where he keeps his thoughts. Sometimes a guard changing shift, or a lover returning to her bed before anyone notices she was gone. We know these patterns better than the men who make them. Each sound carries its own weight, authority, secrecy, fear. We listen not to pry, but because the noise tells us what kind of morning awaits. A heavy tread means temper. A hurried one means gossip. A door closing softly means we can relax for now. When those sounds fade, the castle's lower world takes over. The drip of water from the ceiling where the stones sweat. The scrape of rats behind the grain barrels. Tails brushing wood. The clink of chains from the stable door. When the wind shifts just right. These sounds do not disturb us. They lull us. They belong to the night the way prayer belongs to dawn. Even the scuttling of mice becomes a kind of comfort proof that something else is awake to share the hours. I have often thought that the castle when it sleeps is less a building than a body. The beams groan like bones, the air hums like blood in the ears. We are its heartbeat, small, repetitive, constant. If we were to vanish, the castle would die of silence. Listen closely, and you will hear the smallest noises, the ones only servants notice. A bucket settling as the wood cools. The pop of resin in the fireplace. The distant bark of the night watch's dog, half drowned by the wind, and beneath it all the faint rustle of straw as someone turns in their sleep, chasing a warmer patch. Each sound folds into the next, weaving a tapestry more alive than any hanging on the Lord's walls. Sometimes the noises overlap until they feel like music accidental, unplanned. The rhythm of distant hammering from the smithy still cooling, the irregular beat of raindrops finding the same crack in the roof. A servant's soft cough answered by another across the room. Even the flick of a mouse tail adds a note. We don't call it music, but we recognize its pattern. It's the song of our survival, imperfect, restless reel. The younger ones fear the night sounds. They imagine spirits behind every creak. The old ones smile. We've lived long enough to know that the dead are quieter than the living. It's the living you hear, in the dark, their needs, their fears, their hunger, their work echoing through stone. If ghosts walk these halls, they do so gently careful not to wake us. Perhaps they too remember what it was to serve. There is one sound we never mistake the bell. It tolls from the chapel tower, slow, deliberate. Sometimes for prayer, sometimes for warning, sometimes for no reason but habit. At night, the bell is softer, as if reluctant to disturb the sleepers above. For us below, it marks the hours of endurance. When it rings once, we know we've made it through the first watch. Twice, and the cold has deepened. By the third toll, the worst of the night has passed. We measure time not by light, but by the spaces between those chimes, the pauses where we breathe, and remind ourselves we are still here. There are crueler sounds too, ones that make the stomach tighten. The bark of a guard catching someone where they shouldn't be. The whip of a door slammed in anger. The muffled cry of a servant scolded even after midnight. We learn not to listen too closely to those. Some noises are like sparks look too long, and they burn into memory. So we let them fade, swallowed by the larger hush that follows. Mercy sometimes is found in forgetting. On rare nights, after great storms, there comes a silence, so complete it feels holy. The air holds its breath. The fires have gone out. Even the wind seems lost outside. That silence is heavier than sound, thick, almost visible. You can feel it pressing on your chest, as if the castle itself were waiting for something. In that stillness, every heartbeat seems too loud, every thought too bright. We lie there, afraid to move, afraid to break the fragile peace. It is in moments like that we realize how alive the noise usually keeps us. Without it, the world feels paused, unfinished. So we whisper a word, a prayer, a name, just to remind the darkness that we belong to it. I remember one such night years ago. Snow had sealed the outer doors, the fires were out, even the horses had gone quiet. All we could hear was the faintest ticking sound water freezing drip by drip. Someone beside me began to hum a thin, trembling note that grew steadier with each breath. Soon another joined in, then another, until the room filled with low humming like bees asleep in their hive. The cold did not leave, but it softened. Sound became warmth again. There are practical reasons to listen too. The castle speaks warnings before trouble. If the rafters groan sharply, it means snow piling on the roof. If the air hums strangely through the hall, a window has been left ajar. Even the rats tell secrets when they scatter suddenly. Something larger approaches. We are the keepers of these languages, the interpreters of the unseen. The lords trust guards and walls. We trust sound. Sometimes before dawn, there comes the most beautiful sound of all, the first stir of morning. It begins as a faint rustle. A broom lifted, a door eased open, a cough swallowed in haste. The night hasn't ended, but you can feel it breaking. There's a note in the air, lighter, rounder. Then the bells again, gentler, now closer to mercy than command. The castle wakes, and with it, so do we. But before that final chorus of work, there is always one last moment, a pause when everything below still belongs to us. The fire is ash, the hall above is silent. The wind has run out of stories. All that remains is the sound of our breathing, steady, unremarkable, profoundly human. For that small moment, the noise of survival becomes the lullaby of peace. We do not need harps or choirs. We have the music of the night itself, the hiss of fire, the creak of beams, the sigh of wind, the shuffle of tired feet. Each note humble, each one necessary. If you listen long enough, you begin to understand the castle is not haunted by ghosts. It is haunted by life, by the echo of every soul that ever served within its walls. So, when we close our eyes, it is not into silence that we drift. It is into a symphony, rough, uneven, tender, a song without composer or audience. Only us and the night and the slow-breathing body of the castle. And in that music, we find our rest. Sharing sleep. We call it making a nest. Not a bed, too grand a word. A nest, something built together, twig by twig, straw by straw, shoulder by shoulder, just enough to keep the night from getting inside our bones. We do not make it the same way twice. The shape depends on who is with us, how the wind runs, which stones are sweating, where the embers' last warmth settles. But the rule beneath every shape is simple and old. We keep one another alive. The castle does not give us privacy, it gives us corners. In corners, people learn a gentleness that has nothing to do with softness. It is the gentleness of regard, turning your face away to spare a neighbour your breath, tucking your knees so the next pair of legs can fit, learning where to place an elbow so it rests on cloth and not on someone's ribs. We become a small architecture inside the larger one bodies, fitted like masonry, each supporting the next. There is an etiquette to shared sleep, unspoken but strict. We face the same way unless the room is too narrow. Then every other person turns to keep noses from touching. Hands belong to their owners unless asked. Cloaks are half owned by whoever holds the edge. If someone whispers edge the line, shifts to grant them the outside, they might need to slip out quietly for a chore, or for coughing that should not wake the rest. If someone murmurs middle, we lift and let them pass toward the warm centre. No one asks why. In our ledger, warmth is reason enough. The middle is mercy. We do not keep it, we rotate it. Old bones get it first, then the ones with fever, then the child who carried water until her wrists burned. A chalk mark on the wall keeps score when memory fails, and the mark is rubbed away at week's end, so resentment has nothing to cling to. Fairness is not a luxury here, it is a heat in its own right. Injustice cools a nest faster than any draught. Sometimes an animal claims the middle, the big kitchen cat with the torn ear, or the smallest dog so round with winter fat that he seems made for sleeping. We let them choose. They know better than any steward which spot hoards the last of the day's warmth. If the cat settles between two chests, those two are kings for the night. Purring is a stove you cannot stoke, but can sometimes borrow. Borrowing is the heart of it. Warmth was never owned, it was borrowed from one another. We've said this since before. I was old enough to understand it. We borrow breath as well. The air above a nest is warmer by a fingernail's worth. That multiplied by 10 bodies becomes something like a climate. Our closeness makes a weather that belongs to us alone. You can feel the boundary when you first slide under the shared cloak, a thin line where the air changes from indifferent to friendly. Cross it, and your lungs, startled, begin to believe the night might be survivable. There are pairings that repeat over years because they work. The laundress with the scullion boy she has, thick arms that keep in heat, he sleeps like a stone and doesn't thrash. The baker's apprentice and the pot scraper girl, both small, both quick to warm, both awake before dawn and gone before the rest of us stir. The stable lad curls his spine to match the dog's. The dog, half aware, adjusts in his sleep to match the boy. I have lain many winters beside a woman whose breath is quiet and whose hands are always cold at first. We learn to make peace with each other's weather. We do not mistake nearness for license. Most nights women keep with women, men with men, not from prudery, but from habit and the tidy management of unspoken trouble. Families, when a castle has room for such a thing, press close in their own mound of wool and whisper. Once in a while, in a storm or sickness, the lines blur. Then the only rule is care. We are not perfect, but the nest teaches better manners than sermons do. Touch is rationed like wood. Desire like wine is for daylight quarrels and summer hedges, not for winter floors. We share more than heat. We share position, which is a kind of fate. A body at the edge keeps the watch one ear tuned for the bell, the footfall, the pot about to boil over. The middle bodies keep the hearth of the nest burning. If the centre sleeps badly, the whole group goes cold. The ones near the door learn the language of hinges and wind. Those by the wall learn how stone's breath changes just before dawn. Each position comes with its burdens and its small prides, and we cycle through them as the week turns so no one forgets what the others bear. Sometimes people cry in nests, quietly into cloth. It is not always sorrow. Sometimes it is relief, so fierce the body leaks. A day that did not end in punishment. A letter from home. A heel of bread shared when hunger was planning a sermon. We allow tears, the way we allow coughs, with a shifted shoulder and the offer of a sleeve that is clean enough. We pretend not to notice grief, which is how we keep it from feeling alone. We share stories only until the shivering stops. After that, words are dear. A whispered line can be enough to button the night of the name of a river, the taste of a fruit, the shape of a dress in last summer's light. Then comes the hush that follows, remembering a hush with warmth inside it. If a lullaby rises, it's never the whole song, only the piece that carries the body from standing to lying, from lying to floating. Humming is a bridge strong enough for sleep. Illness complicates everything. We turn faces away from the coughing mouth. We tie rags soaked in vinegar near the head if the steward spares vinegar. We put the fevered in the middle, but open a lane to the door so water can come without stepping on ribs. All night the nest breathes around the sickness, giving what it can without catching fire. In morning we boil what can be boiled. Beat the straw, sweep the place where sweat turned to salt on stone. Cleanliness here is not virtue, it is strategy. Debts are recorded in degrees, not in coins. I owe you 2 fingers of warmth, someone will say after a night, when their feet begged more than their pride could manage. I'll pay with the middle spot when the wind comes from the north. And it happens a sidelong knock of shoulders when we lie down the soft lift of a cloak, the debt settled under breath. No steward oversees these accounts. The nest balances itself by a mathematics of kindness that would puzzle any tally sheet. There is humour because there must be. We tease the one who snores like a saw. We assign him the job of scaring away ghosts. We hang a little bell on the ankle of the girl who kicks in her sleep, so the mice know to move. We keep a ceremony for the first heated stone of a hard winter. The person who warms it must say a blessing before it disappears beneath 3 layers of mended cloth and becomes everyone's favourite secret. Small foolishnesses are tinder. They take a spark and hold it longer than sense would. We have, too, the craft of silent shifting an art that turns 10 bodies without breaking the nest. One person nudges a knee, another answers with a heel, a third lifts an elbow at the right breath. The whole pile rolls a hand's width away from a new draft, as if pulled by a tide. No conductor, no order, given only the memory of how we survived last January when the shutter latch broke and we chose choreography over complaint. On fearful nights, the ones that carry the sound of hoofbeats far off or the echo of a shouted name from the courtyard, the nest tightens. Without thought, spines curve inward, shoulders rise, hands find hands. Fear is cold, closeness is the countercharm. I have felt a tremor move through 10 bodies at once and steady itself by simple contact. We are not brave as heroes are told to be. Our courage is quieter. We decide not to scatter. There are rules about waking. If you must leave, you warn the person whose knee you borrow, a tap, then a breath, then gone. If you return, you warm your hands away from the nest before asking for your place back. Nothing starts a quarrel faster than cold fingers on a sleeping neck. Should you find the middle taken, as sometimes happens when need ranked itself while you were gone, you do not dispute the night's judgment. You take the edge and call it penance. Tomorrow has places to repay you. We mend the nest as dawn approaches. The outer cloak is pulled tighter. The straw is patted into patient silence. Someone turns the heated stone so its cooler face meets a new pair of feet. This is not waking, this is stewardship. We tend our small civilization until the bell pronounces its end. You might think shared sleep erases loneliness. It does not. It makes a different thing of it. Your solitude is smaller, parcelled and warm at the edges. You feel it as a shape inside the larger shape of us. You can be alone and accompanied at once, held by the knowledge that a dozen chests are rising and falling near yours, that if your breathing falters, the nest will nudge you back to rhythm. That is not the same as love, but it is a cousin love welcomes without asking. Sometimes rarely joy visits, the kind that is almost indistinguishable from rest. It comes when the wind forgets us, for a night when the oven stone keeps its heat like a good secret, when someone laughs in their sleep and the sound passes through the nest like a small festival. In the morning, no one remembers the joke, but everyone feels it in their bones as a warmth left behind. We have lost people, of course. Not often, but enough to know how the nest grieves. It does not wail, it reorganizes. Someone takes the missing person's place and does not fit. Someone else shifts to accommodate the gap. A cloak lies flatter than it should. That night, we do not rotate the middle. We give it to absence and lie a little closer to what isn't there. In the morning, we put the straw away with more care than needed and speak the name only once so that the castle learns it, but sorrow does not grow proud. By the time the first bell pulls at the dark, the nest is both looser and tighter. Looser because sleep has done its scattering. Tighter because what remains is willing. We uncurl. We re-own our limbs. We fold the world back into tasks. The shared cloak becomes 3 aprons and a headscarf. The heated stone becomes a doorstop. The straw becomes courage for a floor that has forgotten how to be kind. We rise, and the nest dissolves as if it had never been. That is its last rule. It leaves no evidence for those who would misunderstand it. All day we will carry its imprint, the faint crease on a cheek, the quieter heart, the memory of a hand that steadied ours when fear pretended to be the wind. No steward can tax that. No lord can claim it as his. When the next night comes, we will build the nest again, new, familiar, exact as mercy. We will borrow warmth and repay it, tallying our debts in breaths and inches. We will save one another the only way people like us ever have, by being near, by being fair, by being tender with what the cold would break. And if you listen closely as we settle and the fire remembers it was once a tree, you will hear a line. We say, without moving our lips, the motto stitched into the underside of every winter we've survived. Warmth is a commons, and we are its keepers. The smell of their world. Night has a scent, and in a castle it wears many faces. If you entered by torchlight and hurried through, you might say, only smoke. You would not be wrong, but you would be poor for it. Smoke is the roof of our air. Yes, but beneath it lives a whole village of smells. Honest, ordinary, stubborn as work. They do not perfume the night. They explain it. There is the smell of fire first, because warmth has a voice before it has a flame. Charred oak, soft as wool in the nose. Wet ash that clings to the tongue, like a word not yet spoken. A log that burned too green and left a sour edge in the air. A handful of coals that burned just right and smell faintly sweet like bread, learning to be bread. The chimney remembers every feast. Its breath is a ledger you read with your lungs. There is fat mutton, goose pork rendered and re-rendered, turned into tallow for lamps and into shine for pans. Fat smells like survival plain, relentless without apology. It hangs in the rafters, and on our sleeves marries the smoke, persuades the cold to give an inch. If your hands are dry and cracked, a smear of it softens the pain. If your belly is loud, its scent is a promise, the morning means to keep. Sometimes it turns, goes rancid, gives a sour warning that sends us scrubbing, but most nights it is simply the day's strength still speaking. Ale is the neighbour to fat. From the buttery comes a yeasty warmth, something alive even when the barrels sleep. It is grain becoming kindness, and it shares its breath with us through the staves. If a cask leaks, the floor learns the smell of celebration and sticks to your shoes in the morning. When we laugh quietly at nothing, it is often the ale's ghost reminding the night that it too was once grain in a generous field. There is wool wet drying warming, wearing us. Lanolin has a clean animal truth to it, a comfort that cannot be faked. A cloak steamed by a hearth smells like a sheep forgiving the weather. We carry that forgiveness on our shoulders, and the air around us grows less sharp. When we hang our clothes to dry, the room becomes a meadow that has remembered rain. Beneath all this, the castle sweats. Stone has a slow damp that no broom scolds away. It smells like iron and patience. It gathers where the wall meets the floor and teaches boots how to lose their footing. We know those corners by nose before sight. They are the places the cold likes to think its long thoughts. In summer, the damp is just a murmur. In winter, it speaks plainly. Do not sleep here. There is straw fresh, and then not. New straw is a small golden choir, dust bright in the air, a whisper of last harvest trapped in every stalk. Soon enough it learns our weight, and the smell deepens to something darker, warmer, more truthful. Turn it with your hands, and you release the day's tiredness the way a book releases a pressed flower when opened years later. We beat it, replace it, thank it, curse it, and begin again. There are animals. Horse breath is bread baked without ovens. Cows smell like a promise not to starve. The dog is rain-soaked loyalty with a flea or two to keep it humble. Even the cat crisp with ash, and pride carries the faint spice of mice on his whiskers. When a stable door opens, winter meets a different warmth and pauses to reconsider. We have seen the cold hesitate there. There are the clean things that do not smell like sweetness, but like work. Lie bites, vinegar argues. Soap, when we have it, speaks in a thin, modest voice and leaves a quiet on the skin that feels like permission. We scrub tables with sand and salt. The room smells briefly like a shoreline that has learned manners. In the laundry, steam rises with the breath of bruised herbs, if any were spared for the water. Not lavender. Lavender is a story told upstairs, but mint when the garden was kind, rosemary when the cook remembered us, or bay leaves when the saints were listening. There are snuffed things, a candle pinched between wetted fingers, a rushlight blown out a wick, bent into silence. The moment after thin smoke, warm and blue-grey smells like a door closing softly. It is the scent of the day consenting to end. There are chamber pots and latrines placed where they must be. We will not pretend otherwise, but even they bow to order, ash-sifted lime, scattered lids, fitted doors, wedged so drafts, confess their purpose. Cleanliness here is not luxury, it is a truce with what is necessary. In the morning, the smell is work, again carried away, replaced by cold air and the wet wood speech of pails. Sometimes the air smells of metal, the smithy's last breath, travelling the corridor, iron cooling sparks remembering their briefness, or whetstone and oil where knives become themselves again. Those smells sharpen the night. We sleep nearer to competence because of them. On feast days, the world grows sudden edges. Spice walks briefly through our air pepper, like a rumour, cinnamon like a hymn, and is gone before we can name it twice. We do not chase it. We let it pass like a guest who will not stay the winter. We have our own choir, and it sings every night. There are people. A body has its weather, wet wool, clean, sweat, old soap, new fear, the dry sweetness of tired hair warmed by a hearth. Children smell like running. Old folk smell like stories that forgot to be told and settled into the skin. Sorrow has a scent if you stand close and decide to call it by its right name. So does relief. We do not measure each other by those notes, but we hear them and answer with what we have. An extra fold of cloak, the middle spot in the nest, a sleeve that can be spared. Illness has a shadow in the nose before it finds the eyes. Fever sweetens the air in a way that makes you thirst and pray at once. We turn faces away from coughs, tie cloths in vinegar air to the straw by daylight, heat the stones longer, and add a mercy to the middle. The smell lightens when the night agrees to let the person stay. And do not laugh, winter has a clean side. Open a door too quickly, and the night slaps the room with silver frozen water, split stars, the chalk of breath written on the dark. It smells like a hymn sung by bare branches. It does not belong to us, but it visits and leaves a better order. What we do not have is lavender on the pillow or rosewater sheets. Our soporifics, our local smoke wool bread memory, the hush after snuffing the salt of our own skin. None of these would flatter a noble nose, but each does its work. Each says, "You are home enough to rest." We learn to read the hour by smell when the bell hides its tongue. Before dawn, the air thins cold, stretches its legs. Ash grows shy. Wool returns to mere wool. The yeast in the buttery wakes in its barrels. The animals write their morning signatures. Somewhere a wick is born, and the faint hopeful rasp of a match, whatever stands in. For a match in our world touches oil. The room smells new. Not clean exactly. Possible. If pride lives anywhere in our air, it lives in the way we tend it. We open what we can open. We close what we can close. We choose which steam is allowed and which must be sent to think in the yard. We lift a lid and change the sentence of a room. We are poor in many accounts, but rich in the grammar of breath. You might ask how we bear it, this chorus of unsweetness. We do not bear it. We belong to it. These are the smells of usefulness, of hands that have found their task. They keep company with our weariness and do not lie about what the day cost. When we lie down, the air does not flatter us. It recognizes us. It says, yes, this is who worked here, who warmed here, who tried. That is more comfort than perfume has ever promised and seldom kept. Once a noble woman crossed our hall at midnight, lost on her way to somewhere important. She paused, nose-pinched, and said, "It reeks." We bowed. She left. The door closed. The room breathed. Someone not unkindly said, "It smells like life." And we slept very well that night. So when you think of us, think of this. Our world does not mask itself. It speaks plain: smoke, fat ale, wool, damp stone, straw animal, human, clean, made by effort, dirty, made by living night, made ready for morning. It is not luxury, it is truth you can breathe. And in that truth, gentle and ordinary, we find our rest. The ones who never sleep. Not everyone earns the dark's permission. Some of us hold the night open for others, a door braced with the small strength of our backs. If the castle breathes, it is because certain chests refuse to rise and fall in the rhythm of sleep. We call them keepers, not by rank, but by function. They keep the heat, the order, the chance of morning. There is the firekeeper first among the sleepless. Her tools are simple: a poker with a handle wrapped in rag, a flat shovel for coals, a pair of tongs that remember every feast, a bellows whose leather sighs like tired lungs. She knows the art of banking, how to draw the embers inward and dress them with ash till they glow like buried stars. Too little ash, and the fire dies before cockcrow. Too much, and it smothers sullen and smokeless. She speaks to the hearth in a grammar of inches. She tests for hunger with the back of her hand, for temper with a listening ear. The fire answers. Sometimes it crackles its encouragement. Sometimes it sulks and must be coaxed with splinters shaved by a dull knife in a patient rain of curls. She works in whispers because heat loves quiet. There is the summons runner, a shadow with a listening face. He takes the soft knocks that come, without warning, the timid tap of a chambermaid, sent by her lady, the urgent rattle of a guard who needs water, the guilty flutter of a handbell. His feet memorize the cold of every corridor. He carries messages in the space between breaths, and returns with what is asked for: a warmed stone for aching feet, a pot of broth for a restless lord, an extra blanket, a basin for a sudden sickness. He is trusted to appear and vanish without witness. In a house that pretends ease, he performs the labour of invisibility. There is the baker who never belongs to night or morning because he stands exactly where they trade places. While others are learning to love their nests, he is kneading yesterday's quiet into tomorrow's bread. He tends a small private fire, a cousin to the great one, hot enough to wake the yeast, but not to scold it. He listens with his palms. Dough has a language, and it speaks best to hands that have earned the callous to hear. His hours smell of warm water and grain deciding to be generous. If the bake fails, the day begins with apology. He will not let it fail. There is the laundress, winter's debtor. She warms water long before frost loosens its fist from the window lead. Her wrists are bowls of ache. Her shoulders forget how to be anything but strong. She blows on her fingers, turns a stick in the steaming tub, lays linen over a wooden horse by the hearth, and watches the vapour write brief psalms in the air. Cleanliness for her is not purity, but mercy. Mercy for the sick, for the babies, for the places where bodies must meet and mean no harm. While we sleep, she bargains, with chill and time paying for our mornings in heat and breath. There is the stable watcher. Horses have a way of needing you when the cold is most sure of itself. A mare near foaling will not wait for dawn. A colicky gelding will stamp and groan and ask for a human heart to beat near his. The watcher walks the aisle with a lantern shaded in horn, speaking the low syllables animals trust. He knows which flank to press an ear, against which bucket to tip, which halter to loosen. His boots memorize the path between straw and water, straw and door, door and the wide white dark beyond. When he comes back to the kitchen, at first light ice has stitched his lashes together, and he smiles, as if thawing were a joke he enjoys. There is the clerk servant to numbers and the small tyrannies of accuracy. By a candle cut short to please the steward's ledger, he tallies casks and sacks, marks the debts of the buttery and the promises of the pantry. He listens for mice, not because he fears them, but because their arithmetic threatens his. Wax scars his fingernails. Ink stains the beds of his fingers, like bruises that read. When the wick gutters, he shields it with his palm as if it were a child. His lamp is a minor son he is allowed to shepherd for one more hour. When he snuffs it, he does so with gratitude and regret. And then there is the one who simply waits for the cry from upstairs that comes once a week or once a winter, but must be obeyed instantly when it arrives. The lady's confinement, the Lord's coughing, fit a child's nightmare-grown teeth. Waiting is a labour with no motion. The body grows heavy with it. The eyes learn to hover between shut and open. The mind invents a small river to watch, so the hours move. If nothing comes, there is no thanks. If something comes, there is no time for anything but care. All of them learn the craft of not sleeping. They chew a clove when fortune has been kind. They bite the inside of a cheek when it has not. They rub the lobes of their ears until blood remembers its job. They walk the length of the room counting cracks in the stone, because numbers a rail's thought can hold. They dunk their wrists in a pail, linger there until pain persuades wakefulness back into the bones. They sing under their breath, not to be heard, but to be kept. They practice the old monastic trick, a river of prayer beaded into their thoughts. each bead a word, each word a step, each step a way to the next hour. Even the bravest doze. The firekeeper sits with her poker upright and dreams a bright, impossible summer. The baker's chin falls to his chest and lifts again dough, catching a print of his breath. The stable watcher leans on a stall door. A horse nudges him back into the world with a velvet insistence that feels like forgiveness. They call these borrowed breaths, and they pay them back by standing longer, by walking once more around the room, by counting to 50 and then to 50 again. Fear is part of the wage. Not fear of the night that grows familiar, but fear of failing it. If the fire dies, we wake to a house with teeth. If the bread fails, the day begins with hunger's voice. If the horse thrashes without a hand to calm him, a life may slip out between one torch and the next. Discipline keeps the fear useful. Ritual makes it kind. A poker leaned at the same angle, a door tested twice, a latch lifted and lowered until the sound says safe. Habit is a rope we hold in the dark. There are rules for light. Lanterns are shaded, wicks trimmed short, flames set low enough to be faithful, high enough to be honest. We keep a horn cup near the candle to cap it quickly if draught turns friendless. We never leave a rushlight near straw. Never leave tallow where a mouse can teach it to travel. We learn the difference between burning and heating, between seeing and announcing. The world upstairs prefers illusion that warmth appears when wanted and vanishes when finished. We uphold the illusion by treating flame like a shy guest who must be courted and never startled. What payment comes for wakefulness? Sometimes none. Sometimes a bowl of something hot pressed into a pair of cold hands at dawn. Sometimes a word small, sincere, from someone who knows what you prevented by staying vertical. Often the nest gives the pay when the watcher returns. The middle opens without being asked. A cloak lifts. A warm stone changes owners. A hand nobody's in particular finds their sleeve and tucks it where it will meet a little stored heat. We do not say, thank you. We make room. In our house, room is the currency gratitude prefers. There is too the philosophy of the sleepless learned without books. They know that quiet is a structure you build, not a gift you open. They believe that a steady flame teaches steadier thoughts. They understand the difference between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness knocks, solitude keeps watch. They are not saints, only custodians of the hour others cannot hold. To stand between dark and dawn is to be a bridge nobody notices until it breaks. They take pride in not breaking. Sometimes, while the rest of us drift, they hear things we never will. The mill race far below ice, muttering, foxes testing the moat's edge. The tiny ferocious hiss of snow against shutter. They grow intimate with sounds too small for sleep. The world confides in the wakeful. It's a kindness that doesn't look like one, arriving only because the body refuses what it most desires. When dawn loosens the sky, when the bell remembers its duty, and the castle lifts its head, the keepers have one last task. They hand the day back. The firekeeper opens the banked embers with a practiced stroke. The first flame of morning shows its red throat and learns to speak. The baker turns dough into promise. The laundress steams the air into a version of summer. The stable watcher rubs frost out of a mane, and the animal shivers like a curtain letting light in. Only then, if there is mercy and a corner to spare, do the sleepless take an hour that belongs to them. It is not sleep exactly, it is letting go without falling. An arm around a rolled cloak, a cheek against a warm stone, a breath entering a body that has worked all night to keep breathing possible for others. They do not ask for more. We have a saying, quiet as coal under ash, Even sleep was a service. The ones who never sleep show us the shape of that truth. They hold the night still long enough for us to rest, and the morning open long enough for us to rise. If we are a house of many needs, they are the hour that answers them. And though the ledger will never find a column for their labour, the walls know, the stones remember. The first warmth of every day speaks their names in a language made of flame. Dreams and memories. Sleep, when it finally agrees to sit with us, does not arrive like a Lord Grand punctual announced. It comes like a neighbour at the back door, shy and useful, smelling faintly of what we were just doing. The body bargains, the breath loosens, the mind, forever counting chores, misplaces its list. Then at last the latch lifts. We step into a room we did not build, and yet recognize the room of dreams. Our dreams are not made of velvet. They wear homespun. They do not go far. They circle the fields we left behind, the rivers that knew our names, the kitchens of childhood, where fire spoke a simpler language. Even when a feast upstairs paints the air with cinnamon, and the rumour of rosewater, our sleep does not climb the stair. It walks the lane to the village in our bones, and sits on a doorstep worn smooth by people who loved us before we were useful. The first dreams come on the edge of the embers, while the nest is still finding its shape. They are warm dreams, built from the day's small victories. A heel of bread shared without being asked. A spill forgiven. A stone that held its heat longer than reason. We dream these like a person loosening boots after miles, not for pleasure, but for mercy. They do not last. They do not need to. A few minutes of ease can persuade the whole night to behave. Later, deeper, the past knocks. A mother's hands that smelled of flower. The sound of geese arriving like commas in the sky. A father laughing with his whole chest, the laugh you try to wear and cannot. A brother running faster than summer. A child you carried once heavier with each memory. These visitations are not always kind. They rarely mean harm. They come because the mind keeps better house than we do. It saves the scraps of the day and reheats the best of yesterday for nights just like this. We dream of bread that never runs out, not a loaf, but a table that does not apologize. Of water warm as a hand, of wool that agrees to be a cloud. We do not dream of gold. We dream of time 10 more minutes to finish a task, without haste one more long afternoon, where work and talk braided into something like joy. If riches appear, they arrive disguised as the simplest things, a latch that opens on the first try, a path without mud, a fire that answers when called. There are work dreams too, made of nerves and necessity. The bell that will not stop ringing. A pot that never comes to boil. A door you must reach before a sound finishes being a sound. You wake with your hand already closing around a handle that isn't there, and for a breath your heart runs like a startled hare. Then the room returns to you straw wool stone, and the nest, half asleep, shifts a little to make space for your pulse. You lie back down. The dream, embarrassed, goes to bother someone else. Some dreams are borrowed. You sleep in a cloak that once hung on a noble shoulder, and suddenly a vision, not your own, passes across your eyelids, a hunt. You never joined a hall. You have only ever scrubbed a window that looks down on the world you walk inside. You do not keep these long. They do not fit. In the morning, they fade like perfume on a sleeve that has work to do. But for a moment, in the unlit theatre of the mind, you stand where no steward will ever place you, and the seeing itself feels like a meal. We have winter dreams. You would think them full of snow, but they are full of summer. Heat that does not need feeding, grass that remembers your bare feet, the sound of bees arguing politely with clover. You wake, and for a blink, your skin believes the season you left behind. That blink is enough to lift you upright without cursing. Summer is a kind of credit we spend in January. There are sad dreams that do not introduce themselves and never knock. They come as a corridor you know too well. A hand you cannot hold a name, someone says, as if the person will answer. You wake with wet cheeks and anger's small hard stone in the mouth. The nest answers by not answering. It tightens, almost imperceptibly. A knee presses to your calf. No word, only wait, but the message is steady stay. We have no talent for chasing grief away. We excel at letting it be accompanied. Sometimes the night breaks itself in two. We sleep-wake for an hour and sleep again. The hour between belongs to nobody and to us. In it the castle sounds different, less certain, more honest. We stir the embers without sending them a task. We sip the cold from a cup and call it learning. In that middle hour, the mind is both mender and traveller. It patches day's holes with yesterday's cloth, then takes a short secret walk into tomorrow to see where the ruts will be. We return to sleep, wearing a map only we can read. Smell guides dreams as surely as bells guide waking. Bread in the oven makes a meadow in the head. Tallow turns into sheep and then into hills. Vinegar recalls the winter. We did not lose the smallest child to fever. Smoke is a library. Every page is legible in the dark. Once, the stable watcher came back with hair full of hay and slept beside us. All night I dreamed of warm backs that breathed and hay that kept its summer manners. I woke with straw in my hair and a softness under the sternness of the hour. Touch writes dreams when smell is busy. The heated stone under a blanket teaches the body to imagine hearths we've never owned. A shared cloak teaches the body to imagine kin where none is written. Your ankle finds someone's shin and remembers all the roads you have not taken because this is the road you are on. The floor presses its cold grammar into your shoulder, and your sleep replies with a hotter verb. And for a while, the sentence makes sense. We carry stories into sleep the way a river carries leaves. The baker tells of a market with 3 kinds of cherries. That night the cherries appear in a wooden bowl that never empties, just as his hands never run out of kneading. The laundress speaks of a lake she saw once water, so still it was a mirror, and we dream it as a sky on the ground, where our faces are allowed to be clouds. Tell a thing by firelight, and it grows legs. By morning, it has walked through a dozen minds and come back wiser. The very old among us dream backwards not in scenes but in sensations that step away from the present one by one. The last spring the knees didn't argue. The last winter the fingers forgave. The last day a name sounded the way a name should. They wake with a sigh that is not only for what is gone, it is also for how faithfully the body remembered to keep what it could as long as it could. We listen. Their mornings teach us to put our own away carefully. Not all dreams are quiet. We know nightmares, the way sailors know storms, not as enemies, but as weathers you outlast. The horses come crashing through a dream of wheat. The Lord's voice arrives wearing thunder. The ice breaks where it shouldn't. When the worst image fades, the nest's law applies no questions, only nearness. Someone's palm finds the back of your head and rests there an anchor that does not require rope. You do not have to explain the sea to people who also held their breath. We dream of forgiveness, though we rarely call it that. Of making one small mistake and hearing a laugh instead of the crack of temper. Of returning a broken thing and being told thank you for bringing it back as far as you could. We wake gentler after such nights. We step into tasks with a hand less tight around the handle. It is possible that the day hears us before we speak and decides to be kinder. There are borrowed prayers that sometimes find their way into dreams. Words we overheard in the chapel or at a birthbed thin as thread, still strong enough to bind two thoughts together. We do not remember them in the morning, but the binding remains. You can tell by how your anger takes longer to warm, by how your fear stops sooner at the door. We do now and then dream of the ones above, not to mock them, not to become them, but to place them gently where they belong, inside the same house as us. A lord appears, but without his distance. A lady speaks, but without her rank. They ask us things people ask when they are cold. We give them stones wrapped in cloth. They thank us with faces we have never seen. In the morning we serve them the same as ever, but our wrists carry less resentment. A dream can file down a sharpness the day has no patience for. When someone we love is gone taken by winter or called to another house, we dream them correctly for a while, not as angels or lessons, but as themselves, walking in the room with the exact weight of their step, making the exact sound with their throat when thinking. The first time this happens, it hurts. The second, it heals. The third, it deposits its heat and moves on. Thereafter, memory tends the ember without needing to call the flame by name. Sometimes a dream teaches, not in speeches, in arrangements. You see your corner from the height of a swallow and realize the draft comes from a crack behind the flour sacks. In the morning you move them and the air behaves. You see the order of kindling differently. The first light answers more quickly for a week. You wake with a knot tied in your thinking, and when you pull it, some problem unspools and lies flat. We call these gift dreams. They feel borrowed from someone who has already survived what you are surviving now. We have a superstition about speaking dreams aloud before dawn. If you tell them too early, they wander off and take their lesson with them. If you wait until a cup of something warm or a first task is done, they turn from mist to cloth and can be folded into the day. So we keep quiet at first, light not from secrecy, but from a farmer's sense about weather. Let it finish forming before you step into it. There are those who almost never remember dreaming the firekeeper, the summons runner, the baker, who stands where night and morning exchange names. They carry other people's dreams instead. You can see it on them, a certain softness in the eye that does not belong to fatigue, a listening that seems to reach farther than the room. When they finally sleep, their faces look like fields after harvest, emptied of struggle, still beautiful, waiting for snow to draw clean lines. And yes, once in a rare, while we dream beyond ourselves, a road with no mud, a door that requires no permission, a day where work and respect are the same word. We do not wake bitter from such visions. We tuck them where we tuck spare thread and good needles. We will need them later when a hinge lies or a voice is sharper than necessary. Hope is a tool. We keep it oiled. What, you might ask, do the stones dream of while we rest on them? We think they dream of weight, of being useful to whatever leans of holding the cold so the fire does not have to. In the soft wrongness between sleep and waking, you can almost hear the floor say, "I will keep you if you will keep still." We answer by becoming the shape it expects for a few hours. In the keeping, both of us are less alone. When the bell remembers its duty and the night begins to fold itself small, the last dreams are thin, transparent, as frost on a pane, pretty and fragile. They are of morning done well, a flame that catches a bucket that does not slosh a word, spoken at the temperature that heals instead of harms. We step into them as into shoes set out by a kinder version of ourselves. They carry us as far as the first task, which is all any dream owes a waking body. So understand us like this. Our nights are not empty rooms waiting for daylight to furnish them. They are storerooms of borrowed summers, pantries of remembered hands, workshops where tomorrow's patience is measured and cut. We do not escape in sleep, we gather. We return with what the day forgot to give quiet, small courage, a sense of being accompanied by the very people we miss. When we rise, and we will, the nest loosens the smells. Turn toward morning, the sounds change their names, but something of midnight's charity remains in us. We meet the cold with pockets already full of fields. We greet the work with fingers that remember cherries. We step into the hour, carrying the weight of those who loved us correctly in a dream. And if the day asks what we did all night, we can answer truthfully without saying a word. We show it by how we lift the poker, how we tie the knot, how we speak the name that needed gentleness. We slept, and in sleeping we kept. Morning does not so much arrive as loosen its fingers around the night. The bell remembers its duty. The first note walks the corridors polite as a messenger with good news. Embers open their red eyes. Horses stamp a soft rhythm. Somewhere water agrees to be poured. In that slow unfurling, the castle becomes itself. Again work made visible, warmth made possible, life made ordinary. We rise before the light has the courage to show its face. The nest loosens. Cloaks turn back into garments, not geography. Straw forgets the shape of our ribs and learns to be floor again. The heated stone, patient faithful, returns to its quieter task of being only a stone. We make the room decent, quickly, not to hide what we were, but to remind the day that we are more than our sleeping shapes. There is always someone already standing, already listening to what the fire needs, already measuring flour by memory and habit. The night was kind, someone says, or the night was honest. Both are true enough. If you pass us now, you might think we have always been awake. That is the illusion our labour keeps, the polite trick by which a household pretends comfort is native. But the night knows otherwise. It knows our breath's conspiracy, the arithmetic of our shared warmth, the little courage we stitched to the edge of a rag so it wouldn't slip in the dark. The stones know it too. They wear a faint afterglow where bodies lay and gave their heat to a place that rarely thanks them. Look once more at the lower rooms before we leave them to daylight. See how absence can be orderly, the settled broom, the door set to the angle that keeps draught friendly, the bucket tucked where the floor will not trip over it. These are not decorations. They are promises, quiet vows we make to the next hour. The night handed the world over in one piece. We return the kindness. What did we keep through the long cold? Not wood, not luxury. We kept company, the kind that does not insist on being noticed. We kept a nest that changed its shape to fit us all. We kept a fire banked to become morning. We kept the flywheel of service turning with bodies that sometimes wanted to stop. And somewhere inside all that, we kept a softer thing, with no name that still manages to warm a room faster than flame regard. Not love as songs measure it, but the daily act of turning toward one another and saying with elbows and breath and borrowed heat stay, in 100 years no one will speak our names. No tapestry will show our faces bent over the small heroics of washing and banking and waiting. But if a future child stands in a ruin and feels that the place is somehow kind despite all its stone, we will have been remembered correctly. Kindness leaves a residue even on rock. If your eyes are heavy, let them be. This is the proper time for surrender, the hour when work has not yet said your name, and silence still lies down in the hall like a friendly dog. You have walked with us through the cold along the corridors that whistle like hollow reeds past the smells that speak honestly under the rafters that translate wind into counsel. You have learned the grammar of breath, the manners of a nest, the profession of not sleeping, the small currencies of heat and fairness. You have seen that our dreams are not escapes, but provisions bred for another hard morning. Hold a piece of that with you as the world brightens. Not the hardship, not the ache. Hold the knowledge that warmth grows, wherever people choose to share it, shoulder to shoulder on a winter floor, or voice to voice, across a quiet room, or heart to heart in the long consideration that refuses to look away. Warmth is not a gift the lucky receive, it is a commons the willing tend. Above us the Lords will wake to a comfort they believe arrived by itself. That is all right. Illusions have their uses. We will keep the real story the way we keep the fire banked under ash, glowing enough to light the next task when asked. Our pride is not in being seen, it is in being true. Even sleep, as we've said, was a service. If you have drifted toward rest, stay in that drift. Let the bell be far away and kind. Let the floor of your room remember to be gentle. If you are still awake, set your breathing to the castle's morning slow, modest, steady. Imagine a palm over the ember, coaxing it open. Imagine water becoming warm without wasting its patience. Imagine bread taking shape under hands that never hurry its goodness. The day learns from such imaginings. Before we part, allow a word from the threshold where story turns back into silence. You have been listening with Sleepless Historian. If this quiet wandering through servants' winter nights helped you unclench the day and lean toward sleep, you are welcome to come back whenever you need a softer hour. We make these journeys slowly, on purpose, tales that hold still long enough for your thoughts to set down their buckets. If you wish, subscribe and keep us near. It costs nothing but a click, and it tells the bell to ring you gently when new nights are ready. If a particular image stayed with you, the cat choosing the middle, the heated stone, learning your name, the hum that turned cold into company, share it in a comment when morning is no longer shy. Your words will help someone else find their way to warmth. We are not in a hurry. The past is patient with us when we move at the speed of care. There will be more doors we can open together, more kitchens that smell like truth, more halls that teach us how silence is built, more fields waiting inside dreams to pay for another January. For now we leave the servants to their work and the castle to its breathing. We step back softly the way you leave a room where someone has finally fallen asleep. One last look, the fire opened, the dough rising, the horse blinking frost from his lash, the laundress's basin pluming its small winter cloud, the clerk cupping his candle as if light were a bird that trusts him. The keepers have handed the morning to the rest of us, and the rest of us will pretend it arrived by itself. That is the bargain of households, old as hunger and as decent as bread. May your day inherit some of this steadiness. May your tasks remember to be just. May you find a corner that belongs to you, not by right but by recognition. And when night returns, as it always does, may you have hands near enough to borrow, breath near enough to soften the edge of the hour, and a story long enough to outlast the cold. Good night, or good morning, whichever shape the light is wearing where you are. From all of us here at Sleepless Historian, thank you for keeping watch with the unseen keepers. If your eyelids are heavy, trust them. If your thoughts are loud, give them this: a nest of words, a banked ember, a promise that warmth can be made on purpose. We will be here when you need us moving at the tempo of rest.